looking back to yesterday.
Engaged in crime, I grasp my throat, raise my mind, starts to smoke, enforce a mental overload, angry again, angry again, angry again, and again, engaged in crime.
Damn, that makes me mad.
Me too.
Arrgh.
The topic I picked for today is Angry Atheists, and for those who are listening on the podcast and won't be seeing the titles, the word angry is in scare quotes for several reasons. I'd like to open by reading a statement from a fellow named Rabbi Marc Gellman, which was published on April 28, 2006 on the Newsweek website. The title is, Rabbi Gelman Tries to Understand Angry Atheists. I think I need to understand atheists better. I bear them no ill will. I don't think they need to be religious to be good, kind, and charitable people, and I have no desire to debate or convert them. I do think they are wrong about the biggest question, are we alone? And I will admit to occasionally viewing atheists with the kind of patient sympathy often shown to me by Christians who can't quite understand why the good news of Jesus' death and resurrection have not reached me or my people. However, there is something I'm missing about atheists. What I simply do not understand is why they are often so angry. So we disagree about God. I'm sometimes at odds with Yankees fans, people who like rap music, and people who don't like animals, but I try to be civil. I don't know many religious folk who wake up thinking of new ways to aggravate atheists, but many people who do not believe in God seem to find the religion of their neighbors terribly offensive or oppressive, particularly if the folks next door are evangelical Christians. I just don't get it. This must sound condescending and a large generalization, and I don't mean it that way, but I am tempted to believe that behind atheist anger there are oftentimes uncomfortable personal histories. Perhaps their atheism was the result of a tragic death of a loved one, or an angry, degrading sermon, or an insensitive eulogy, or an unfeeling castigation of lifestyle choices, or perhaps even something worse. I would ask for forgiveness from the angry atheists who write to me, if I thought it would help. Religion must remain an audacious and daring and, yes, uncomfortable assault on our desires to do what we want when we want to do it. All religions must teach a way to discipline our animal urges, to overcome racism and materialism, selfishness and arrogance, and the sinful oppression of the most vulnerable and the most innocent among us. That's quite enough.
Yeah.
Rabbi Gelman, let me say to you, in the spirit of love and understanding, that perhaps the reason you encounter so many angry atheists is because you are a pompous, arrogant, self-righteous, obnoxious jerk. And that makes me angry.
Might be the case. I know there's a lot more to what he said. He starts off by saying he really wants to understand. He thinks he needs to understand atheists, and he just doesn't understand them. And everything he writes clearly demonstrates that he doesn't understand.
It's not so much that he doesn't understand atheists. It's that he pretends that he's trying to understand atheists when, in fact, he didn't try at all.
Yeah.
You know how I know he didn't try? Let me read this bit again. Perhaps their atheism was the result of the tragic death of a loved one, or an angry, degrading sermon, or an insensitive eulogy, or an unfeeling castigation of lifestyle choices. That guy did not talk to a single atheist before writing this completely uninformed bit of drivel. If he had talked to an atheist, then he could have actually gotten some individual opinions and not made up a bunch of stuff and prefaced it with the word perhaps.
Well, see, the other thing is that he didn't even need to bother to talk to an actual atheist. He could have simply just read one of the many, many books like Why I'm Not a Christian by Bertrand Russell or Dawkins' The God Delusion, which explains in great detail exactly the intellectual justification behind these individuals' atheism and demonstrates that there's no need for, and consider my own personal story, I didn't lose any level and I didn't suffer any wrongness at the hand of the church. I actually enjoyed some of the more fire and brimstone sermons when I was younger. I wasn't put off by any of this. I was actually seeking justification for my beliefs in order to eventually possibly become a preacher.
And I'm completely different. I was raised in an atheist household by two atheist parents who loved me very much, and I loved them, and I had a great relationship with my parents, and I thought about whether their beliefs were right, and I decided, like many people do, that I just agreed with what my parents thought.
Right.
And too many times I see people like this Rabbi Gelman trying to do amateur psychoanalysis of atheists in a vacuum, so to speak. Not actually looking at what they either don't listen to what atheists say they believe, or they dismiss it as it couldn't possibly be true. Here are your deep-rooted personal problems that caused you to be an atheist.
Yeah. It's perhaps one of the reasons why Rabbi Gelman runs into so many angry atheists is because they're able to detect the fact that while he stands there and says that he'd really like to understand atheists, he's a liar. He doesn't actually want to understand atheists.
What he would like to do
presumes.
is tell you what atheists believe.
Here's what I think is the case. I know you think you've made an intellectual decision, but clearly something went horribly wrong. And how pompous and condescending and
well, he said this must sound condescending and a large generalization, and I think that was like the only really true statement in this entire piece.
Well, I think there was another true statement where he said that religion is assault on our desires. In many cases, religion is often used as an assault on people's desires. No, you can't do that, and even though there's no good reason for you not to do it, you can't do it because God has said you can't do it.
Right. Now, I would like to explore today two questions. Number one is, are atheists really angry? And number two is, why do so many people like Rabbi Gelman feel that it's important to write about how angry atheists are? Yes.
So you want to cover whether or not we're angry?
Right. But actually I'd like to cover the other question first, which is what's up with all the people who are writing about angry atheists? It's just my personal subjective notion of what's been going on lately, but there seemed to have been a distinct uptick in these articles about angry atheists. And it's no coincidence that these happened after a number of books have been selling extremely well. The first big one that springs to mind is Sam Harris, The End of Faith.
Right.
Then Sam Harris also wrote Letter to a Christian Nation. Richard Dawkins wrote The God Delusion, and anybody who's been watching this show for any length of time knows that I think I'm not overgeneralizing when I say the show, we're all big fans of Richard Dawkins. He's one of the most eloquent and interesting science popularizers alive.
Which ends up kind of working against us in a way, because he's been characterized as the atheist pope. As if we're all walking in lockstep. Oh, Dawkins said it, so it must be true. That's not quite the case. Yeah. If I'm walking as much in lockstep with Dawkins as I am with, scientists when they come up with, sound theories that help us to learn about the world. So.
And I'm walking as much with him as anybody who says something eloquently that I agree with. And as soon as he stops doing that, you and I had big arguments about his assertion that raising a kid religious is child abuse.
Yep.
I am not willing to go that far, and I don't hesitate to say when I disagree with Richard Dawkins. Dawkins, until writing The God Delusion, had not shied away from mentioning the fact that he was an atheist in his science books, but The God Delusion was the first book that tackled the issue of religion head-on as the main theme. Recently, let's see, there was also philosopher of science Daniel Dennett writing Breaking the Spell, which analyzed religion as a social phenomenon and a cultural evolution. And most recently, the British author Christopher Hitchens has been making the rounds to promote his book, God is Not Great. And here's an article that came out. I'm just going to read the title, the subtitle, and one paragraph from this, and you'll get the idea of how these books are being discussed in the mainstream press. This is from the Associated Press. It says, several recent books assail faith quite bluntly. Religion kills. The latest front in culture wars. Atheists attack. The time for polite debate seems to be over. Atheist writers are making an all-out assault on religious faith and reaching the top of bestseller lists in a possible sign of resentment among non-believers over the influence of religion in the world. Now let me just go back, look over those sentences I just read again, and pull out some key words that I think are noteworthy. Assail. Wars. Attack. Assault. Hey, Associated Press, what's up with all the combat metaphors?
Yeah.
I don't think my experience having read books by Dawkins and Harris is that they are not the ones who are introducing them primarily into their books. I'd also like to focus on this phrase right here. The time for polite debate appears to be over. Excuse me, what is writing a book? You know, these books lay out the arguments for atheism and talk about why atheism makes sense as a worldview. Last time I checked, you don't go to Borders and buy assault rifles along with your novels.
Yeah.
What is a book except for an attempt to write something that other people will hopefully read, preferably a lot of people, so you can make a lot of money and they will agree with it or have interesting discussions about it? Is that not polite debate?
Well, I think it goes beyond that, and I think it's a big fat lie. What have we seen as the outcome of these books by Harris, Dennett, Dawkins, and Hitchens? Debates, public debates. For the first time in my life, in 38 years, I can watch on television, over the internet, whatever other media, real debates on the issue of religion. And I think that's what's terrifying some people. For a long time, the religion was just presumed to be the status quo. Mm-hmm. That everybody's going to be religious and we're all just going to get along and oh yeah there's some Madalyn Murray O'Hair maybe this disgruntled atheist, but we can largely dismiss that. Well, now they can't dismiss it because what we're seeing is real debates, real intellectual criticism of religion, and religion can't stand it. When I was watching, there's a clip from the Bill O'Reilly show with Kirk Cameron on there, talking about the debate that they had with the Rational Response Squad, Brian Sapient and Kelly M. And Bill was like, what happened there? They just got really mean on you. And Kirk was like, yeah, I was so surprised these atheists got so mean and nasty.
Now let me show you my picture of a crocoduck.
Here's a picture of a crocoduck. And what they're doing is confusing frustration over this completely idiotic proposition.
What they're not doing is taking the discussion seriously by bringing up these ridiculous points,
right.
and then they're telling people that to take the discussion seriously is to be angry.
Yeah. Yeah, if I decide that we're going to have a debate on evolution and you show up and your evidence against evolution is a picture photoshopped of a crocodile's head on a duck and call it a crocoduck, we don't find these in nature, therefore evolution's a lie. I think whoever is debating you not only is justified in feeling frustrated and angry, they're probably justified in calling you a complete frickin' idiot.
Yeah. There are
if you're not going to take it serious.
There are sometimes when calling people names is not an ad hominem. If the names happen to be accurate.
Yeah, if I tell you that you are completely ignorant of the theory of evolution and the biological evidence in favor of it, that's not necessarily an attack on you in order to discredit your claims. What it's saying is that you keep presenting these ridiculous claims about crocoducks and crap. It's one of the reasons why Dawkins and some others have refused to debate creationists, because they don't want to lend any credence to what they say. Now, they've broken this on a few occasions.
Yeah, that's true.
And done the debates. But, just because... Oh, never mind. You continue.
Well, let me zero in on Richard Dawkins for a couple of minutes, because Richard Dawkins is a guy who gets singled out a lot as one of the angry atheists, and in particular, like you just said, the atheist pope. And
without the funny hat.
Right. Well, actually, one interesting thing about the use of the word pope is that religious terms are slung around in order to insult people.
Yeah.
And that's kind of funny. I mean, it's meant in kind of an ironic way, but you notice that when a religious person wants to discredit something, they seem to overwhelmingly often go for the, you're another religion.
Yes.
Metaphor.
I'm fine with all those other religions that are just another religion, but your religion that's just another religion, that one really bugs me.
Yeah. And it's funny that Richard Dawkins gets called angry so often, because the adjective that comes to mind most when I see Richard Dawkins, I'm sorry, is cute. I mean, he's this little short guy with this sort of high-pitched voice. He's very soft-spoken, and I've never seen him, I've seen him grit his teeth a little bit when talking to the incredibly annoying Ted Haggard.
Yeah.
That's the angriest I've ever seen him.
I've seen him completely shred somebody's dignity with a well-placed, very intelligent witticism.
Right.
As kind of a return.
And one of the witticisms that gets quoted frequently in the God Delusion, I don't have the full quote with me, but you know exactly the one I'm talking about.
Sure.
It's, God, the Christian God, is like the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. He's vindictive, brutish, angry, short-tempered, etc.
Malevolent, misogynist, sadistic,
right.
blah, blah, blah.
Now, that's pulled out because that is, frankly, the strongest language in the book.
Yeah. And all the rest of the book, he's explaining why, answering questions, addressing issues,
right.
and is incredibly eloquent and inspiring at times. And one of the things that all of those atheist books have done, for the most part, I don't think Large Christian Nation really touched on it, but Vic Stinger's book and Dawkins' book both spend some time near the end talking about life as a godless person. Life, how wonderful life is, and the beauty of nature and art and all this other stuff, and how you can still appreciate all that.
Yeah.
Maybe appreciate it more.
Other books by Richard Dawkins, continuing in the tradition of the great Carl Sagan, have also touched on, what science does, he feels, to make people's lives meaningful and interesting.
Right.
And I think that shouldn't be discounted. Well, Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion, just came out in paperback, and he's written a new introduction to it, which is partly a response to all the media criticisms that came out for the first run of The God Delusion. And he published this week. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, or he published last month, and I forgot to mention all the links and all the articles that I'm reading from today, as I'm trying to make a habit of doing in my episodes, are on a new post on the Atheist Experience blog. That's atheistexperience.blogspot.com. You can look for the post dated today, that's June 24th, 2007. And you'll find links to everything that I bothered to print before coming here. So Richard Dawkins published some of these responses to criticisms in the London Times. And here's the one that I am looking at in particular. And this is not a specific person criticizing him, but it's a generic conglomeration of the things that have been said to him. And it is, I'm an atheist, but I wish to dissociate myself from your shrill, strident, intemperate, intolerant, ranting language. First of all the adjectives used there just now are really no better than the adjectives he used to describe God. It's just that they're using them to describe a guy, Richard Dawkins.
Now, one of the things, though, is that and I'm sure you're getting ready to get to the fact that those adjectives aren't true of what Dawkins says, at least not in my opinion. One thing is that they are true of what religion does, not all the time, not in every case, not with everybody. But religion is necessarily divisive. It does create an us and them mentality, and that you know, what he hit him for, you know, not being inclusive. Was that one of the adjectives in there? Or?
Sorry, non-inclusive, but
non-inclusive, non-inclusive and intolerant. A religious person's accusing Dawkins. I mean, that's just insane almost.
Now, I think that just his first sentence in reply to this is, you know, incredibly straight to the point.
Right.
Very well said. Objectively judged, the language of the God Delusion is less shrill than we regularly hear from political commentators or from theater, art, book, or restaurant critics. And I saw a video of Dawkins doing a longer version of this thing I printed, and he proceeded to read some quotes from restaurant critics who said, you know, I don't know what restaurant critics say, but it's like, you know, this is a pathetic waste of space, worst food I've ever had. I mean, think Simon Cowell, for God's sake.
Tell the chef this is low-grade dog food.
Right. Simon Cowell, every single week on his show, says things that are more offensive than anything in the God Delusion, unless you happen to be of the mindset that anything bad said about God, even slightly bad, is worse than anything else you can say bad about anyone else.
Right.
To continue, the illusion of intemperance flows from the unspoken convention that faith is uniquely privileged, off limits to attack. In a criticism of religion, even clarity ceases to be a virtue and begins to sound like aggressive hostility. A politician may attack an opponent scathingly across the floor of the House, he's British, and earn plaudits for his robust pugnacity. See, that's cute. You see what I mean? But let a soberly reasoning critic of religion employ what would, in other contexts, sound merely direct or forthright, and it will be described as a shrill rant. My nearest approach to stridency was my account of God as the most unpleasant character in all fiction. I don't know how well I succeeded, but my intention was closer to humorous broadside than shrill polemic. Restaurant critics are notoriously scathing, but are seldom dismissed as shrill or intolerant. A restaurant might seem a trivial target compared to God, but restaurateurs and chefs have feelings to hurt and livelihoods to lose, whereas blasphemy is a victimless crime.
He stole my bumper sticker.
I'm actually also reminded to bring up the time that Richard Dawkins went on the Stephen Colbert show, and Richard Dawkins closed by saying, you know, the thing about the God hypothesis is that it's unparsimonious and something else, and Stephen Colbert in character said, I don't know what those words mean, but if you mean you know, necessary to live a moral life, then you're absolutely right.
Thus endeth the lesson. Oh.
So let me bring up this question again. Are atheists really angry? We've been jokingly angry on the show so far, but I think it probably has come through that there are serious issues underlying this. When Rabbi Gelman speculated on what the random atheist off the street might say if he asked them why they were so angry, but didn't actually ask any atheists why they're so angry, if he had asked them, I think that, given the typical atheist that I know, he would have gotten one of two answers. One is, I'm not angry, what are you talking about? Or the other is, yes, I am angry, I think I have legitimate reasons to be angry, and let me tell you about them.
Right.
And I bet you none of them would have been, I heard a sermon that was mean to me.
Right. You know, we talk about this, and I'm not generally an angry person. There was a period of time, shortly after I came to the realization that my Christian beliefs were unfounded, that there was no good reason for me to continue to accept those, and then I was kind of in this nebulous agnostic land, and considering other religions and other claims and the broader philosophical positions about whether or not there's any good reason to believe that there's any God, etc. By the way, the answer is no. But there was a time when I was angry, and I wasn't angry at God, as some Christians might accuse me of and have accused me of.
By the way, just as a point of grammar, anyone who's angry at God is not an atheist by definition.
Right. And that was the point. I can't possibly be angry at something that I don't believe exists. But I did have some anger, and what it was the result of was realizing that, because this happened to me after my 30th birthday, so I had wasted a good many years of my life in belief, and not always, I lived a fairly regular life and went out and did things, and I was not the perfect little Christian. I went out and did my drinking and carousing or partying or whatever on occasion. I don't want to make it sound like I was any kind of, saint who suddenly had some epiphany about, God's not. It wasn't like that. But I did have some anger over the fact that, I only get one life. If my current views are correct, then when I'm dead, I'm dead. So now I've wasted a number of years believing things that weren't true, not investigating and exploring the reality that I live in to find the things that are true. And that was frustrating and made me angry. But can I be angry at my parents? No. They sincerely believed, and they thought that they were doing what was right for me. It's natural for them to try and pass on the beliefs that they have. I don't fault them for that. I prefer that they didn't hold those beliefs, but that's their choice. Do I get angry at the ministers and who shepherded me through different parts of my Christianity? Well, no. I happen to think that some of them may have been lying or deceptive about what they actually believed, but they may also still have been doing it for
I don't see any reason to think that for the most part they didn't believe in what they were saying.
Sincere belief is likely.
They really thought that they were doing what was best for your life.
Right. Even if their beliefs about God were different from what they were specifically saying, they still felt that they were doing good and doing so. There's no reason to get angry with them. And so I got angry at myself for being gullible, for accepting all this. And then that really didn't last very long because I realized, this started when you were very, very little. You walked down the aisle at church when you were about 5 for the first time. You were completely surrounded by people who believed, who supported that delusion in you. You were never taught how to critically examine these claims or anything else. So it's one of those things where there's not really any fault. And instead of being angry at yourself or worrying about what's wasted, you should just be glad that at some point your eyes actually opened, that you did actually decide to go and look and investigate and could come to a reasonable conclusion about what is and isn't true.
Right, and anger is to some extent counterproductive, because if you're sitting there seeing red, then to some extent you're not thinking about here are the problems I see in the world and what should be done about them.
Right, and the point of that is to say that I've never had any irrational, furious anger. Even when I was at my angriest about the situation, it was a kind of a reasoned anger, and I went through step by step to analyze it. But I do think there is such a thing, and Christians have called it a righteous anger, and this is how they get, whenever we point out something that's particularly nasty that their God's doing, going to do, or claims that we're deserving of, that's a righteous anger. You had it coming. I think there is such a thing as a righteous anger or a justified anger, in that if somebody sexually abuses a young child and you don't get angry about it, there's something wrong with you. I'll say that flatly. I don't need to develop a syllogism to prove it. I don't need some divine authority on moral precepts in order to hold that to be true. As far as I'm concerned, if you hear about a child being abused and don't get angry, there's something wrong with you. Don't know what it is, but there is. And if you're one of the people doing the abusing, there's really something wrong with you. So as far as I'm concerned, there are good reasons to be angry about things.
Sure. Let me consider the fact that a lot of atheists actually aren't angry and get accused of being angry even when they're not. And I'm going to sort of be a hypocrite about what I said earlier when I was complaining about people like Gelman doing amateur psychoanalysis on people he doesn't know, and say that it's highly plausible to me that one of the big reasons why people often perceive atheists as angry is projection. When you say something bad about, when you say something about how you don't think there's any reason to believe in a God, people who have believed in a God all their lives and think that it's a central component of their lives get angry. And when somebody else makes you feel an emotion, you project that that person is feeling the emotion themselves. So that's one explanation for all the talk about angry atheists. Another one is that...
It's also the reason why I think all women love me. Because I love all women, so I'm going to project all that. Sorry.
Precisely.
Just a bit of fun sidetrack there.
Another thing is that a lot of times atheists are angry because there are people like Rabbi Gelman who are big fat jerks.
And I don't know what Rabbi Gelman's weight is.
I don't either. So I'm making unfounded personal speculation.
How dare you accuse that man of being fat? He weighs a $1.05.
But you know, there really is, in a lot of cases, this sort of drive to insult, and especially to insult using religious terms. And sometimes it's done even unconsciously and not in anger. I have a friend whose acquaintance I recently made who teaches logic, is very smart, is a Catholic, but a nominal Catholic. Like, you know, she's about as Catholic as I am Jewish. Although, I mean...
So roughly about as Catholic as the Pope is. Oh, sorry. I'm sure I offended somebody.
Yes. Well...
See, that's an aspect... I'll get back to that. Finish your thing.
But she said something to me that I hear all the time, and I've tried to develop a reasonable, pat answer to it, which is that, you know, when you go on TV or whatever and talk to people and you know, spread your atheism, you're being just like a fundamentalist. There's no difference between you.
Oh.
And we had a long talk about that, and you know, and the point that I want to make is, first of all, there are different aspects to being religious. There are different aspects to being fundamentalist, and just because we don't agree with fundamentalists doesn't mean that we think that everything fundamentalists do is automatically bad. One thing that fundamentalists do that is in some ways admirable is they believe something strongly, and they are motivated to go talk about it and discuss it and talk about reasons why they think they're right.
Right. It's the same reason I couldn't be angry at my parents for raising me religious.
Right. Now, the reason we don't agree with fundamentalists is they're wrong.
Yeah.
But
that's a critical element, though, because we get accused of this on several cases. I've dealt with it in the past week in email of, well, you're just like the fundamentalists. No, because we're not putting out anything dogmatically. We're not making claims that we cannot back up. We're not making mysteries and supernatural nonsense. We're simply, atheism being the lack of belief in a God, is based on the position that the rest of you haven't made your case.
Right. More to the point, it's not that fundamentalists are wrong specifically, because a lot of people are wrong and I still, you know, like and respect
Sure.
them. What bothers me about fundamentalism, and what is not like atheist evangelism, if you will, is that fundamentalism as a conclusion is a stopping point. Once you reach a particular belief, like, say, the Earth is 6,000 years old, you are bound by that type of religion to say, this is what I believe is absolutely true on faith, and nothing will ever change my mind about it.
Right, and the Creationist Museum has, as part of their requirements for, part of their list of doctrines of beliefs that you have to sign, is that any time when science appears to disagree with the literal translation of the Bible, science is necessarily wrong. That's fundamentalism, folks. That's dogma. That is being mired into a belief no matter whatever else happens. We don't do that. If you have evidence that your God exists or that your claim is true, my mind can be changed. My mind has been changed.
And we're here ready to change our minds when people talk to us.
But I'm not going to believe it because your Uncle Bob saw, Mary in a taco or something.
And, I expect that there's a lot of people in the audience right now at home thinking, that's ridiculous. He's just paying lip service to the idea that he would change his mind, but he's really set in his ways as an atheist. And, all I can say to that is I can't convince you that I'm open to change my mind. But the fact that I even say I'm open to change my mind is way more than any fundamentalist does.
Right.
Because if you ask a fundamentalist, what would it take to convince you that you would be wrong? They would say nothing.
Well, there are a few who would say, who take belief in God as the default position and belief in God is justified until you can prove God doesn't exist. So if you can absolutely prove scientifically that God doesn't exist, then I won't believe. And
but
to that,
there's
normally
no
I'll
such
say,
thing. There's no set of conditions under which they would believe. They would say, yes, you've succeeded in scientifically proving it.
Right. It's a big. Well, what I would do is rather than let them make the definitions that way, define the God you believe in. Tell me exactly what it is that you think this God is, can do, has done, will do. Does it interact with the physical plane at all? And I think once you do that, then there may be a way to scientifically examine that claim. And in the cases where we have, what we find is that the results are no different from chance. And in the cases where people have defined their God so that science specifically can't touch it, some kind of panentheistic first cause, you have a completely useless and irrelevant God. It makes no difference whether you believe in him or anything else. He does nothing. He is nothing. It's not distinguishable between his non-existence.
Right. But, what it comes down to is the chief issue that I have with religion is not that some people believe differently than me, and hence, getting back to Rabbi Gelman again, it's completely misleading when he compares the disagreement between atheists and theists to, I'm sometimes at odds with Yankee fans, people who like rap music, and people who don't like animals.
Yeah. As if those differences are remotely similar.
Religion has a special place in society, and it's that it's socially inappropriate to criticize religious ideas.
Right.
Unless you're a fundamentalist, I guess, and criticizing ideas that aren't mainstream. But faith is awarded a certain measure of respect that other things, like the quality of a restaurant, don't get. As Richard Dawkins said, it's not considered shrill and hateful to say this is the worst restaurant I've ever eaten in. But somehow it's considered shrill and hateful to say God did a lot of stuff in the Bible that a morally responsible being wouldn't do. I printed a quote from Douglas Adams, but I'm thinking now that it's way too long for me to actually read because, frankly, everything Douglas Adams writes has written is so brilliant that is so beautifully crafted,
right.
even free-form speaking, that to take a sentence out of context would do him injustice.
So
all hail mighty Douglas Adams.
Yes.
But let me summarize the
quote.
Point of it.
Sure.
Let me summarize this quote. And again, this is linked at atheistexperience.blogspot.com, where he says that in other sciences, even sciences like history, where you can't ever determine the absolute truth, people argue things to death, like, say, why the Corn Laws came to be abolished when they were. And people don't take things, people aren't allowed to say things like, well, this is my belief about why the corn laws were abolished, and I won't hear anything against my belief. But religious belief is put in a separate stratum where it's just rude to say, I don't think your religious belief makes any sense. And the reason, Douglas Adams says, is because if you subjected religion to the same kind of criticism that history and physics and biology are routinely subjected to, it just wouldn't stand up for a minute. I guess that can wrap it up.
Cool. And we've got John on the line.
Hey.
Or do we?
Yeah, I've got some serious thoughts about the power of church.
About the power of what?
Church.
Yeah.
Suck my Asian.
Interestingly, on the little thing here, John's original point was supposed to be that churches take advantage of weak people.
Which was an extremely valid point.
It was a really good point. It's a shame that John didn't make that point, but we can make it without him. We've got like less than a minute.
I think we should give this caller who's been waiting so patiently, like, real quick chance. No?
Stan,
Do you have
there?
a wrap-up?
Hi, yes. Hey, you guys.
You got 10 seconds.
You inspired me to start my own show, Bible Banquet. It's on 7 o'clock tonight. I shamelessly would like you guys to write.
Yeah, I've called into your show before.
Oh, great. Appreciate it.
We only got 30 seconds left, Stan.
All right.
Try and call earlier. They moved our time slot, but we'll get back to you.
Love you guys. Bye.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot to everybody for calling in. Appreciate everybody joining us at the new time slot from 3 to 4:30. We'll see you again next week. Stay tuned for Jesus versus Religion and see if you can figure out who wins.